أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاء المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب عليم قالوا طائركم معكم إن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دوني آلهة يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل السابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا متاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتي من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا ونطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم أن لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد ضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فعنا يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللنا لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحيي الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु मोमिनो मख्तल ज़हरा की ये रुदाद सुनो मोमिनो मख्तल ज़हरा की ये रुदाद सुनो की है उम्मत ने मुसीबत में जो बेदाद सुनो मुस्तफ़ा हमारे गए घर हुआ बर्बाद सुनो बाप को रोती हुई बेटी की फरियाद सुनो उसको रो लो जिसे उसको रो लो जिसे रोने का इजाज़ा न दिया आके उम्मत ने जिसे बाप का पुरसा न दिया आके उम्मत ने जिसे बाप का पुरसा न दिया बाप के गम में थी गमगीन नबी की बेटी गश पगश खाते थे फुरकत में पैगंबर की अली रोती हसनैन को लिपटाती थी ज़हरा बीबी खुश्क न कब्र पैगंबर की हुई थी मिट्टी शर्म सरवर के यतीमों से ना खाई आकर آگ دروازے پہ امت نے لگائی آ کر، آگ دروازے پہ امت نے لگائی آ کر، ہائے بولی دروازے کے پیچھے سے یہ آ کر زہرا، کیوں مسلمانوں کیا ہے میرے گھر پر حملہ، اس کی بیٹی ہوں کہ تم پڑھتے ہو جن کا کلمہ، اس کی بیٹی ہوں کہ تم پڑھتے ہو جن کا کلمہ، اپنے بابا سے میں فریاد کروں گی للہ، ہم ستائے ہووں کو اور ستاتے کیوں ہو، یہ تو بتلاؤ میرے گھر کو جلاتے کیوں ہو، یہ تو بتلاؤ میرے گھر کو جلاتے کیوں ہو، اکلئی بولا کہ حیدر کو اکلئی بولا کہ حیدر کو نکالو باہر، ورنہ آ جاؤں گا بن پوچھے میں گھر کے اندر، سن کے رونے لگی یہ بات نبی کی دختر، لات دروازے پہ ایک ماری لائنے بڑھ کر، آ کے پہلو پا وہ جلتا ہوا دروازہ گرا، بیچ میں تھی در و دیوار کے ہائے زہرا، بیچ میں تھی در و دیوار کے ہائے زہرا، جلتے دروازے کے اوپر سے مسلمان گزرے، اور تھیں فاطمہ زہرا اسی در کے نیچے، شور کرتے ہوئے گھر میں جو لئیاں پہنچے، دیکھ کر بلوے کو روتے تھے علی کے بچے، در کو اماں سے ہٹاتی ہے پریشاں زینب، ہے مدینے میں بھی یہ شام غریباں زینب، ہے مدینے میں بھی یہ شام غریباں زینب، تھی بہت صابرہ پر بنت نبی چیخ اٹھی، کیل جلتے ہوئے دروازے کی پہلو میں لگی، قتل محسن ہوئے اور ساتھ میں پسلی ٹوٹی، عرش تھرانے لگا زہرا کی یوں گود اجڑی، تھام لو آ کے ذرا تھام لو آ کے ذرا مجھ کو یہ زہرا نے کہا، ہائے فضا میرا بچہ میرا محسن نہ رہا، ہائے فضا میرا بچہ میرا محسن نہ رہا، کیا بیاں ہوں گے جو زہرا پہ ستم ڈھائے گئے، اس پہ پابندی کے مظلوم نہ فریاد کرے، کی مسلمانوں نے حیدر سے شکایت آ کے، غم میں بابا کے بھی رونے نے دیا اب جی بھر کے، زخمی تھا پہلو بہت زخمی تھا پہلو بہت، سانس بھی کتنی چلتی، غل ہوا مر گئی ایک روز نبی کی بیٹی، غل ہوا مر گئی ایک روز نبی کی بیٹی، بر محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ۔
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dr. Syed Shabbir Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for the Salat Sawab of the marhumin listed on the screen and for all marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Mujibu is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ يَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 أَمَّا يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ يَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Shop with a sheikh and a cop. Our annual collaboration with the Sanford Police will take place on Saturday, December 17th at 10 a.m. at the Sanford Target location. This is an opportunity for us to support our Sanford community by gifting a shopping spree to underprivileged children. Please donate generously for this cause. To donate, please contact Sajjad Ali Virji at 407-719-6575 or email outreach@masjid.org for more information. At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Kirmani to give tonight's lecture with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters, youngsters in Islam and Iman here in Florida, across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: who is the Lady of Heaven? When we come to those role models that Islam sent for us, we find at the forefront the likes of the Holy Prophet. And one of the elements as to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created man for was to inspire and allow man to reach a level of kamal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created at one level those creations which were the angels, which were told and mandated to do that which is good from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on the other side, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created animals. And animals were not perhaps endowed with the level of intellect that perhaps we have been. And so they are not accountable and liable. But it's this human being, which our ulama say is split between the two. It has the potentiality to be that of the angels, and it has the potentiality to be worse than the animals. It is split between these two. And it is in there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, this is your choice and your destiny as to what path you choose. But at the same time, Allah has said, I have given you certain role models. I've shown you the way. This verse that we are constantly reciting day in and day out in Surah Al-Fatiha, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, Allah has told us that if you want to know where Sirat al-Mustaqim is, I'm telling you, follow these paths that I've laid out for you. And when you follow these paths, you will get to that straight path which I am guiding you towards. So with this being said, at the first level, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in a hadith Qudsi, we are told, لَوْلَاكَ لَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْأَفْلَاقِ Ya Rasulullah, accepted by all Muslims. Had it not been for you, I would not have created this universe. So this individual is at the height of perfection. Insan kamil is Rasulullah. But when the ulama come to this issue, when it comes to Rasulullah's thoughts, when it comes to Rasulullah's statements, when it comes to Rasulullah's, all of the things that are his thoughts and those things that he said from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those are a hujjah on all Muslims, that they have to hear what Rasulullah says, and his words need to be analyzed and thought about and implemented in life. But the ulama say the actions of Rasulullah are not a hujjah on everyone. The actions of Rasulullah are a hujjah on men. There are certain things that women are not to do in terms of the actions of Rasulullah. If Rasulullah had more than, for example, one wife, that rule is not going to apply to the women. Even the way that one prays, the salah, there are distinct differences. So Allah in His wisdom and Allah in His adala was mandated, in the sense of, the metaphorical sense of the word, Allah had to make sure that there was a role model for women. First point. Second point, when it comes to this idea, in an era, in a time, in an environment where people of that era were burying their daughters alive, some tribes were, in alternative years even, they were burying their daughters and committing infanticide. What the Quran says, وَإِذَا الْمَوْعُودَةُ سُعِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ, that on that day, the day of judgment, the infant girl who was buried alive will cry out to Allah, for which sin was I killed? What did I do wrong? What was my sin? And of course there was no sin. It was ignorance, it was jahl, it was this that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to eradicate. That's why when it comes to the position of the lady that we are commemorating tonight, Rasulullah, the one who's at the highest level, how has he revered and respected his daughter? But it's not just because it's his daughter. What is the significance of this personality that we need to look at? The first thing that I want to look at tonight is, who is Fatima in the eyes of Rasulullah? Number two, how is it that all roads lead back to Fatema Zahra? Number three, how is it that you may find that the Ahlul Bayt in general and Fatema Zahra in particular are a superpower for your life? You may realize it, you may not realize it. And finally, why is it such a travesty? Why is it such a tragedy of what happened to the Lady of Light, Fatema Zahra, on this planet? Why is that something that is noteworthy to look at? This is our agenda for the brief moments that we are here together. Wherever you are, here in Florida or across the globe, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, if we want Islam or any religion that wants to stand the test of time in the West or Western philosophy, it has to have practical benefits. And what you're finding is people are gravitating in the West, as I've mentioned to you before, they're gravitating towards Buddhism. They're gravitating towards, for example, yoga. And they do this because they say there are practical benefits therein. And because of that, they actually adhere to this. But similarly, are there practical benefits in Islam? This is something we need to look at. Let me give you an example. A couple of examples. In fact, first example is the author Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote Sapiens. You may have read Sapiens, Homo Deus, and many of his books that are very famous, that many intellectuals recommend. Now, I'm not recommending his books entirely, and I'm not agreeing with everything he says, but at the same time, the intellectuals of our world are saying, read his books, And he says, I would not be able to write my books if it were not for meditation. In particular, he says, vipassana meditation, a particular type of meditation. He said, if I didn't have that, there's no way I could write it. Why? He says, because the clarity that this style of meditation gave me, because in history, when you're writing world history, forget world history, when you're writing the history of mankind, you can go off on one tangent and you go for an entire book. So how do you condense human history into a book that's just this big? You have to have some level of clarity. He says, I got it from there. First example, Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio is the multi-billionaire head of Bridgewater Investments and all of this. He says he meditates twice a day, morning and evening, 20 minutes. He says this is what's given him the clarity to be able to think about the markets. And you can go down the list of people. Now you may say in this environment, why am I talking about these people? I'm talking about these people because these are the people who are creating the culture and the narrative of our society. And they're impacting our world, whether you realize it or not. Now the third point which I'm mentioning to you, does Islam have any practical benefits today? Does Islam have anything that gives me power? Does Islam have anything that brings the best out of me? Does Islam have anything that helps my health, wealth, and happiness? And you'll find that there's indeed things that Islam has that give you more ability in all three of these domains than you can imagine. But we have forgotten it. Or it's right in front of our eyes and we don't realize it. Come back to the Lady of Light. When it comes to this great personality, it's that individual who Rasulullah is quoted as having said, according to all Muslims, Fatima bad'atum minni, that Fatima is a part of me. First point, Rasulullah is the one who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says when he takes him to Mi'raj, that my servant, he drew nearer and nearer until he was 2 bows distance or less. Ya Allah, you have no zaman, you have no makan, you have no time, you have no space, you have no physical dimensions. What do you mean 2 bows or less distance? Qaba qawsayn aw adna, 2 bows or less. What do you mean that you drew, that he drew, Rasulullah drew, and Mi'raj 2 bows or less distance? Fakhruddin al-Razi, Sahib al-Tafsir al-Kabir, one of our greatest scholars, or of the greatest scholars of the Muslim world, not Shia. He was called Imam al-Mushaqqiqeen. Why? Because he would write in his tafsir one whole paragraph, and you think the way he's going, he's actually aligned with, for example, Shias, for example, although he was Sunni. And then at the end, he would write a one-liner that would cast doubt on the whole previous paragraph. Anyways, there was an open-mindedness amongst our scholarships that has always existed. For example, Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani, who's the top scholar in Qum today, one of the great students of Sayyid Khouy, who's the most senior scholar alive. Some say he is the A'lam, or some say Sistani. There's a debate amongst people, the people who are in the know-how. Anyways, he says if you take all of the ulama of Ahl Sunnah on one side, and you put Fakhruddin al-Razi on the other, the knowledge is more Fakhruddin al-Razi. Fakhruddin al-Razi says in this verse that this was not used out of the norm. This verse, this language that Allah used in the Quran, Qaba qawsayn aw adna, was used for a very particular reason. I say this because you'll find this narrative amongst Muslims. You need to know, the next generation needs to know how to answer these things. Some people say, we need to come and follow the Salaf. What's the Salaf? We need to follow, the Salafis, right? They say, we need to follow the Salaf. What? Those were the pure righteous companions of the beginning. What they don't tell you is the implication within their statement is that the people who were closest to Rasulullah understood what Rasulullah was saying. That is, the people in terms of time that were the closest to the time of Rasulullah necessarily understood more than the people who came afterwards. And many ulama and scholars today have said that's not necessarily true. Fakhruddin al-Razi came much later, but he may have gotten a deeper understanding. Ibn Sina or Avicenna or Avicenna came much later, but he may have gotten a deeper understanding because they built on the understandings of before. Anyways, Fakhruddin al-Razi said this line, 2 bows or less, was used. هَذَا بُرِدَ عَلَىٰ اسْتِعْمَالِ الْعَرَبُ وَعَرْضِهِمْ. This statement was used because of the language of the Arabs and the metaphors of the Arabs before Islam. Whenever 2 tribe leaders would want to state that they had a peace treaty, an agreement, that they were working together, and they had an alliance, they would come together and they would take 1 arrow and 2 bows. They would put it together and they would shoot it together in the distance. The implication of the statement was that your war is my war, your peace is my peace. Fakhruddin Razi was saying that Rasulullah, when he was doing this, when Allah was saying this about Rasulullah, he was saying metaphorically, "O Muhammad, your peace is my peace, your war is my war." Meaning whoever is at peace with you is at peace with me, and whoever is at war with you is at war with me. This same Rasul is saying, Fatima bad'atum minni, Fatima is a part of me. Whoever angers her, angers me. Same Prophet, in the same event in Mi'raj, that is, he's going to the heights, and in terms of the physical, and he's meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spiritually. Physically he's going, but spiritual proximity to Allah, Allah says 2 bows or less. In that same situation, they say the nur of Fatima was brought back. That is, the thing that made the wujud and the presence of Fatima in the physical form manifest was brought back. Although this happened later, but there are narrations that there was a spiritual presence therein, because spiritual dimensions can be there later. Leaving all of this aside, the Muslim world accepts that Rasulullah is at the height, and Rasulullah constantly said certain statements to bring to the attention of the people who this individual is, Fatema Zahra. That's why when Imam Askari says that we, the Imams, are a hujjah on the people, and Fatima is a hujjah on us, it's not to be taken lightly. The first principle is this. The second one, which I want to quickly cover tonight, is this. Look, Fatima, the Zahra, is a secret amongst the secrets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never forget this. Remember, Ayatullah Najafi Mar'ashi, the one who has the largest library in Asia, in Iran it's currently, he spent his whole life dedicated to books. And he wrote a wasiyah, a public will, a private will and a public will. The public will, I recommend you read, and it has 3 points, 25 points. 3 of them relate directly to Fatima Zahra. And he says, my son, it's addressing his son, but he was just addressing the public indirectly. He says, number 1, make sure that when it comes to your understanding this lady, says, number 1, make sure that you study the khutbah fadakiyah. The khutbah that Fatima Zahra gave, it gives such gems of wisdom that the world doesn't realize, number 1. Never neglect it. He says some of the greatest scholars and linguists have neglected it. Don't neglect it, he tells his son, number 1. You know, you give your children the best advice. I recommend you read Thomas Jefferson's letter of advice to his granddaughter. It's called the Canons of Conduct, where he says some very practical advice. I invite you to do the same in light of the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt used to do these things. The scholars do these things. So we should also tell our next generation what's the best things that they've learned. So he says, number 1, make sure, 25 points, but 3 of them relating directly to Fatima Zahra. He says, number 1, make sure that you never forget to study and analyze this khutbah. You know, when Shias used to go left, right, and center because of persecution, you know, it happened all over the pages of history. They had to flee overnight. Sometimes they had to leave the Persian belt, sometimes Iraq, sometimes other places, sometimes East Africa, sometimes people leaving Uganda, and still people are fleeing left, right, and center today. It happens everywhere. But what did they take with them? One of the things that they say, especially the Sadat used to tell their kids, make sure that if you know nothing else, memorize the khutbah of Fatima Zahra and Fadak. Why? Because that was your identity as a Shia. Anywhere you went, that's what you had to know. So he said, number 1, remember this. Number 2, he says, don't forget in the qunut of your salat, بِحَقِّ فَاطِمَةَ وَأَبِيهَا وَبَعْلِهَا وَبَنِيهَا وَسِرَّ الْمُسْتَوْضِعَ فِيهَا أَن تُصَلِّ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ. Now someone may say, why are you not reading this? I don't read this in this salah, I do it in my private one, otherwise there will be nobody standing behind me in salah. So it's a time issue. But when it comes to this in particular, he was saying, make sure you recite this by Fatima, Ya Allah, by Fatima and her father and her husband and her sons, and the secret with which she is buried. Grant me my dua. And the final one, he says, my son, never forget the tasbih of Fatima Zahra. It will help you in the most difficult times. Recite it not just after salah, but at any time you're in a difficulty. This is the superpower I wanted to mention to you. Tasbih of Fatima is a miracle. We have made it a ritual. It's a miracle. We have made it a ritual. I finished salah. Bismillah, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. I'm done. 1 minute, flat, done. I'm out. I gotta go. I got 90 minutes for FIFA. I gotta finish my tasbih, 1 minute out. I got all this time to play. Don't get me wrong, I play sports as well. It's great, it's really wonderful. Don't get me wrong. But remember, life is a game of priorities. You figure out what are your priorities based on what you give time to. So when people come to me and they across America, they call me and they say, help my kids, help my family life is suffering. We don't have religion in our house anymore. We used to be so religious. I just ask them a few questions. What are your priorities? And you find out very clearly what the priorities are. What's that old saying? You reap what you sow. So what are you sowing? And what are you reaping? That's the answer of the matter. I know families who drive their kids still till this day. They're in the Carolinas and other states that are a little rural. They drive 6 hours one way to take their kids to Sunday school, for example. They spend the night and then they go back the next day. And there's some people who are 6 miles away and they can't make it. You figure out what your priorities are. I'm not saying that if you come to madrasa or not, you're religious or not, that's not my barometer. I'm just saying, what's a priority you make time for? If you want to be healthier in life, you have to make time to get fit. You have to work out in the morning, in the evening. You have to find some time to work out. If you want to be, for example, happier, you have to figure out how to train your mind to control your thoughts. If you want to be wealthier, you're going to have to make sacrifices in some space. For example, you can't always be hanging out and play video games. Although people are making a lot of money doing that also these days. But what I'm getting at is, you need to figure out there are sacrifices along the way. So coming back to this, don't do this. I'm not recommending that we do this here. Look, I know we have to be practical here. If I start doing what I'm about to say in the masjid will be empty. There won't be anyone here. So do this in your own privacy. Do this at home. Do this when you're alone. Do this when you're off to college. Do this when you're at work. But really use this tasbih in a miracle way that it actually is. Because remember, if the hujjah, if we are told, if a ma'soom tells a non-ma'soom something in terms of guidance, that's something for us to learn from. But in this, a ma'soom is giving guidance to another ma'soom. Rasulullah is telling Fatema Zahra that this is what's going to help you. So when you take this, first of all, this is your meditation. You know what the Buddhists are saying, meditation and yoga and stuff like that? This was supposed to be our azkar. These were supposed to be our zikrs. These zikrs are supposed to change your life. These azkar. But because we just zoom past it, it doesn't cause any change and reformation. So when you are in your tough time and you're in a tough spot, financially or health-wise or family-wise, just stop for a moment. Recite this tasbih, take longer than normal. Don't do it in front of anyone, do it in seclusion, number one. Number two, when you recite each of these words, feel it. Recite it from here, from your heart, from the essence of your being. And say Allahu Akbar. But when you're saying Allahu Akbar each time, feel Allahu Akbar. In the sense that you realize and contemplate on what it is that I'm really thinking about when I say God is great, not God. Allah is great. Why Allah over God? Because Allah has no plural form. God can have a plural form. Allah is the ultimate deity. There's no plural form, singular only, that's it. Allah is great. What am I thinking? Am I thinking in the depths of the oceans and those areas which we have not even explored yet? That Ray Dalio says, forget Mars. Mars is afterwards. We have to first see the ocean that we haven't even explored its whole floor yet. What's down there? The pressure. Do I analyze the heavens? سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَمِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. The Quran says, we have placed signs in the horizons for them and within them. The macro and the micro, Allah is saying. You want to know what I've built? You know what this universe I've created? Look in the horizons, the macro. And look within yourself, the micro. And you see a whole world within a world within a world. Think about that when you say Allahu Akbar. Feel that in your bones when you say Allahu Akbar. And know that that Allahu Akbar is what is giving you the strength and who has your back to achieve anything that you want in life. Number one, when you say Alhamdulillah, the first element is awe. Allahu Akbar, awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second is Alhamdulillah. In what sense? In the sense of absolute gratitude. That, Ya Allah, everything is from you. Every blessing I have in my life is from you. Every greatness that I have in my life is from you. Remember one thing, I was just reading a book the other day on this, that says that the world that we live in is designed to make us unhappy. Why? Because it's known that when you go on social media, although social media has many good things, one thing that they have figured out, if they make you feel less than, if the algorithms can make you feel less than, and you feel inadequate, that is, you're not wealthy enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not good looking enough, you're not this enough, You are trying to find something to fill that void. And this is not new, by the way. The ancient Greeks and Romans used to do this. They used to go and sell in the bazaar a fragrance, a cologne, a itar, or whatever you want to call it, and they used to write freedom on the bottle 2,000 years ago. Because the people knew that they were not free, or someone who was living employed or slaved by somebody, they're looking for freedom. Buy this cologne, you'll get the freedom. So when people are feeling less than, you can then market to them and they are more inclined to buy. Somebody here is probably thinking I'm messing up their business model. I'm sorry if I am. But what I'm trying to get at is, I don't want you to be discontent. I don't want you to be unhappy. When you reflect on what you have in your life, that is the absolute greatest thing to be grateful of. When you have gratitude, that is the secret formula to happiness. Not my words. Dr. Adam Grant, Professor Adam Grant at the University of Pennsylvania. When Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, when her husband died, and when Vanessa Bryant, Kobe Bryant's husband died, both the wives were left to survive. They asked scientists, what's the only way I can cope with the fact that my husband's died and I have these children to raise? How can I deal with this from a scientific perspective? Dr. Adam Grant says there's only one way. So what? Gratitude. Gratitude? You want me to be grateful that I lost my husband? What? No, not that you lost your husband. Be grateful for the moments that you had with your husband. Be grateful that this tragedy wasn't worse than it was. Maybe your whole family would have been gone, but you still have a few people left. Be grateful and think about those moments that you were able to live together. You know how many people don't have the opportunity to find someone and build a life and start a life? Remember that one sister I told you about a few days ago who was in the UK and giving a talk at that gala dinner, paralyzed from the neck down. Happiest person I ever met in my life. Because she was focusing on the beauty. What did Bibi Zainab say? Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. Difficulties have the potential to bring out the best in people. If you think about it this way, and you realize that the beauty that can emerge from it. So the superpower there, alhamdulillah, is that gratitude. Having that opportunity is huge. Second level. Third level, subhanallah. And this takes a lifetime to perfect. You know, there's certain things, you can tweak your spirituality, but the essence takes time. But glory be to Allah. That's not even adequate. Allah is above all. When these words seep into your heart and you say them as those who meditate say them, you think on them, you contemplate on them, you do tafakkur and tadabbur and you feel it and you do this, the time may pass and 1 minute may become 1 hour, but it still feels like a few seconds to you. Islam gave you all of the systems of spirituality. We have forgot it. Why? Because sometimes we don't know the meaning of what we are reciting. Sometimes we don't know why we're doing what we're doing. Sometimes we don't know the depth of what's there. Really understand Tasbih Fatima and implement it. Now, final thing, and I'll conclude here. When it comes to, I'm trying to tell you how, looking at this lady, because she is the axis of everything. Ayat-e-Tathir, Fatema Zahra. Surah Al-Qadr, there's a Zahir meaning, Batin meaning. Zahir meaning is the night of power and destiny. Batin meaning is Fatema Zahra, according to our scholars. When it comes to Mubahila, Fatema Zahra is the axis. All of the roads lead back to these people. And these roads and these people, that is the Ahlul Bayt and Naima, they lead back to Fatema Zahra. Remember, Fatema Zahra is the daughter of Lady Khadija, who is the wealthiest person in Arabia. She could have had it all if she wanted. But despite that, to not be material, to have essentialism, you know this minimalism term that's been used in society? You want to be happy? Adopt essentialism. I recommend you read that book. Adopt minimalism. Or this idea of you don't have to have all the bells and whistles. You just need a few essential things, and all those extra things, get rid of it. This is called qana'at in Islam. In the Quran, it's called to just have, to be sufficient and that which is enough. You don't need all these bells and whistles. It's okay if you want to have a few, that's fine. But if you want true happiness, bring happiness to other people's lives. You'll actually get it back in yours. This is how the system works. Anyways, the greatest tafsir, if you look at all of these people who have done tafsir in the history of Islam, I'm bringing the Quran and spirituality and Fatema Zahra all together in one. Here, right here. They'll say there's the work of Fakhruddin Arazi, Sahib Tafsir al-Kabir. There are Shia Mufassirin, there are Sunni Mufassirin, different scholars, and they've all contributed. And many of them have done great work, regardless of the school of thought. Allah, if someone works hard, Allah will give some benefit to anyone. So you have Majmu' al-Bayan, you have the works of Sheikh Tabrasi and many other scholars throughout the times. But in modern times, if you look at one of the tafsirs that Shia and Sunni alike say, in terms of the depth, in terms of the effort, in terms of the work that's been put in, we have not had something for a very long time, is Tafsir al-Mizan by Allama Tabatabai, Sahib Tafsir al-Mizan. This work is a philosophical tafsir of the Quran that has a lot of depth to it, and it requires someone to really think really hard about. First point. Second point, Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli says that perhaps in the next 200 years we may not have something as good as this. Third point, Mutahari, the one who I mentioned numerous times, Shahid Mutahari, who was a professor at Tehran University in the philosophy department, although he was a mu'ammam, but he was teaching in the secular dynamics. And he says, I pray to Allah that everything that I write, I make sure I verify it, it's original, and I'm not copying it from anyone. And he prayed for this. And he was unique in his style. He says, I did not find a single problem in my life except that I found its solution in the tafsir of Mizan. Meaning, the Quran is the Quran, but the way that Allama Tabatabai explained it, it found and it opened all the doors of difficulties for me in my life. This is what the illustrious scholastic endeavors and achievements of Tabatabai is. Now, why did I tell you all about Tabatabai, the teacher of Mutahari, the teacher of Sayyid Hussain Nasr, the teacher of so many people? Why? Because Tabatabai himself says, Allama Muhammad Hussain Tabatabai, Sahib Tafsir al-Mizan, he said, I had a teacher who had been arranged to come and teach me. And one day he says to me that I am only coming to teach you because your family called in a favor to me. Otherwise, I don't see you putting in the effort. Otherwise, I don't see the scholasticism from you. When he was very young, this teacher's telling him this. And he said, that day, I did another, and I prayed to Allah through the tawassul of Fatema Zahra. That, Ya Allah, by this lady, open and illuminate my heart, illuminate my mind, so I am able to understand the difficulties of what I'm being taught, and I can flourish and thrive in it. And he said, that prayer and that sincerity, and that day and this day, I've never needed anything else in my educational endeavors. My dear brothers and sisters, this same Allama Tabatabai said when he had his most difficult problems, he would go to the shrine of Imam Ali and he would ask Imam Ali to pray for him, to have his eyes open, his ears open. Not the physical ones, the metaphorical ones of the heart and the mind. Believe me, that Fatema Zahra who helped Tabatabai in that time can help you in your business, in your life, in your happiness, in your family life, in your children's relationships, in your marriage, whatever problems you're having. Tap into that power, but do it with sincerity. Do it with love, do it with humility, do it with feeling all of those three statements, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, and Subhanallah. And remember that lady, and your problems will be solved, inshallah. Don't forget these superpowers. Tonight, we commemorate the Lady of Light. There's much to say, and the musibah that she went through. But one thing that I want you to remember is, after Fatema Zahra, after Rasulullah, she would call out, Subbat alayya masaibun law annaha subbat ala al-ayyam sirna layaliya. She said, Baba, my father, after you, those calamities, those difficulties befell me, that had they fallen on the days, they would have become the dark nights. Allahu Akbar. When Fatema Zahra was crying, they came to Ali al-Murtada. Allahu Akbar, the test of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. They say, Ya Ali, oh Ali, tell your wife Fatima, tell Fatima Zahra, either cry in the day or cry in the night, but do not let her cry in the day and the night. Why? Because we're not able to sleep. The people of Medina are not able to sleep. I will say, Ajrukum ala Allah, may Allah have mercy. What was this tragedy? When we lose a loved one, we cry, we weep, and the people console, and they give condolences. What nation was this? What ummah was this? What people were this? When the the daughter of Rasulullah wishes to weep, they say do not weep, they say do not cry. Perhaps somebody was remembering their sins, perhaps someone was remembering the calamities, perhaps someone was remembering what atrocities they did on the heart of Rasulullah. Ajrukum ala Allah. Fatima, she was not even able to mourn for Rasulullah, and in this circumstance and in this situation, her children are there. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein are there, and they are told that when this happens, Fatema Zahra, her state has begun to become weakened. Why? Because that moment happened when they came to the door of Fatima. Inshallah, if light permits, we will discuss tomorrow. But even Shibli Nomani, the historian who's not a Shia, who writes in Al-Faruq, a book that is used in universities across the world, he writes that it was based on the demeanor, based on the way he operated, based on the history of the second Khalifa. It would not be surprising if he did what the Shia say that he did, that he brought fire to the door of Fatima Zahra, perhaps not to use it, but to intimidate the daughter of Rasulullah. Azadaro do jumle, Shibli Nomani ne kaha कि कोई बाइद नहीं कि आग आई, मगर शायद इस्तेमाल करने की वजह नहीं थी, मगर धमकाने के लिए, डराने के लिए. ऐ शिबली नौमानी, फातिमा बज़ब्तुन मिन्नी नहीं याद रहा कि दरे रसूल पे, दरे बतूल पे आग ले आए. ये वही दर नहीं जहां रसूल हर सुबह आते थे और कहते थे अस्सलामु अलैका या अहले बैत नबुवा. क्या ये वही दर नहीं है कि अल्लाह ने कहा सद्दल अबवाब इल्ला बाबा, सब दरवाजे बंद कर दिए जाएं, सिर्फ ज़हरा का दरवाजा खुला रहे मस्जिद में. क्या ये वही दर नहीं जहां रसूल कहते थे मुझे जन्नत की हवा की खुशबू आती है. ऐ मुसलमान आलम, तूने ये क्या किया? बज़ातुर रसूल फातिमा पे जुल्म ढाया. इन्ना लिल्लाहि व इन्ना इलैहि राजिऊन. सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, सल्लल्लाहु अलैका या अमीर अल-मुमिनीन, सल्लल्लाहु अलैकी या फातिमा ज़हरा सय्यदत निसा अल-आलमीन, सल्लल्लाहु अलैकी या फातिमा ज़हरा सय्यदत निसा अल-आलमीन. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى, السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. مأتم حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein. پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے, تربت بھی شکستہ ہے. پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے, تربت بھی شکستہ ہے. پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے, تربت بھی شکستہ ہے. کیا حال یہ امت نے زہرا کا بنایا ہے. پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے, تربت بھی شکستہ ہے. پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے, تربت بھی شکستہ ہے. خاتون کوئی غم سے یوں چور نہیں دیکھی, ایسی کوئی دنیا میں مستور نہیں دیکھی.
18 برس میں ہی لگتی جو ضعیفہ ہے،
پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے۔ دربار میں ظالم نے کی ایسی پذیرائی، کس طرح سے تو بی بی پھر لوٹ کے گھر آئی، بالوں کے سفیدی نے سب حال سنایا ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے۔
تو روتی رہی گھر میں حیدر سے بھی چھپ چھپ کے، عصمت کی طرح دکھ بھی پردے میں رہے تیرے، کچھ درد تیرے بی بی بس جانتی فضا ہے،
پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی
شکستہ ہے۔
دو ایسے جنازے ہیں تاریخ میں جو اٹھے، بس گھر کی ہی لوگوں نے دونوں کے دیے کاندے، ایک فاطمہ زہرا ہے، ایک بالی سکینہ ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے۔
مرہم تیرے زخموں کا بی بی نہ ملا اب تک، اولاد امیہ کی باقی ہے جفا اب تک، رونے پہ بھی پہرا تھا، تربت پہ بھی پہرا ہے،
پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے۔ مسمار تیرا روزہ امت نے دیا جب سے، بابا تیرا رہتا ہے، تربت پہ تیرے تب سے، خب گمدائے خضرا میں بابا تیرا رہتا ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے، پہلو بھی شکستہ ہے، تربت بھی شکستہ ہے۔
مہدی سے کوئی پوچھے کیا اس پہ گزرتی ہے، آواز بقیہ سے جب رونے کی آتی ہے، آنکھوں سے لہو رو کر वो भी यही कहता है,
पहलू भी शिकस्ता है, तुर्बत भी शिकस्ता है, पहलू भी शिकस्ता है, तुर्बत भी शिकस्ता है।
फातिहा।
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Assalamu alayka ya Ali al-Murtada. Assalamu alayka ya Fatema Zahra. Assalamu alayka ya Khadijat al-Kubra. Assalamu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Assalamu alayka ya Hussein al-Shahid bi Karbala. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد تقي وعلي النقي والحسن العسكري ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن وقابة الإيمان وإمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك وتأتيه فيها طويلا.